We just wanted to tell you about some work we did alongside LabKey. Well, they did the bulk of the work. This Globus file transfer module. If we have time, we'll talk about some other useful tools that we've done at ITN. Sorry for my organization slide template. We have to use this. So just some real quick background on the new file transfer module. What is Globus? Why did we need to integrate it? And we had to extend what LabKey wrote for us, which is normally how we do things with LabKey. They do the initial first draft, and then we might have to add or change some code later. Okay, so probably like a lot of you guys, the ITN has more and more large files. We have RNA-seq files and FCS files, and the way our organization is set up, we're mandated in a lot of cases to release those files. And they've been de-identified and deemed safe for release. But some of these files, like our new RNA-seq files, we have a folder that's probably a terabyte's worth of files. So Adam Aster, who used to be the head of TrialShare, my old boss, before he left, he was evaluating options with leadership about how are we going to get these files out. And so he discovered or had heard about the Globus Endpoint system, and it's created by the University of Chicago. It's basically a way to create a network to share large files, and we'll talk a little bit more about what all this is. So Globus Connect, Globus is a proprietary brand name. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but it's a piece of software that you put on your laptop or your server, and then you can create a Globus endpoint, which can upload or download files. It can do nice things like resuming from restarts and things like that. The nicest thing about it is, let's say that you had a terabyte's worth of files that you wanted from the ITN and you didn't have room on your own computer. You could actually initiate from your computer, you can initiate the transfer from us to your organization if you have a Globus endpoint and you're allowed to do that. So it was basically one option that we chose because a lot of other users are using this Globus Connect system. And like I said, an endpoint is just the destination or the source. So when Adam left, he basically told our head biostat, Noha Lim, and I, he said, integrate Globus with TrialShare. And we kind of looked like this, you know, what does integration mean? He didn't really tell us that part. He had some ideas, but we said, well, what is integration? So integration boils down to two things for what we're trying to do. We need a way for TrialShare LabKey, you know, our LabKey installation, to be able to talk to the Globus system on behalf of the user. So in other words, you can actually initiate file transfers from inside a LabKey installation. So that's one kind of integration. But then Noha, you know, realized that the other crucial thing that we could do is to associate our list of files that we have on the endpoint with any data set that you can imagine or any piece of study data that you want. So it could be demographics, it could be scientific data that you want to associate with these files, because otherwise the user just has a giant list of RNA-seq files and they don't know what to do with it. So when we started this whole thing out, we started with a list as the interface for the user. A list is a LabKey data type that's basically a table, because we thought we wanted to be able to put this module anywhere inside LabKey. And so LabKey, Susan Hurt from LabKey especially, had to go through all this coding to figure out how to get all these things talking. And I'm not going to go over this, but every time you want to transfer a file and you want TrialShare to tell Globus that it's okay to transfer this file, all this has to happen. And this is a high-level view. There's another view of this that's got about 30 steps for all the things that have to happen. So the development process went great. You know, LabKey delivered on time. We had to do a lot of work on our end. We had to take our dev server outside of our domain. In other words, so it was accessible on the internet. Because even just to test this thing, Globus, their network has to be able to talk to our dev server. So more than most projects we've done with LabKey, there was a ton of just back and forth with IT and getting the different domains to be able to talk to each other, and it was much more of a group effort than we normally have to deal with. One decision we made was that these are only ever going to be publicly available files on the ITN endpoint. We're not going to use it for in-progress work, for unreleased work, or for any sensitive data, and that made it a lot easier for LabKey to develop this for us. And for us to set it up. And it's also a lot easier on the user. So now users can download files from our endpoint with the Globus Personal Connect system. or if their organization allows it, they can start inside TrialShare and get them all the way, the files all the way to their org's endpoint. After they got done, we realized that we didn't really need lists. We needed data sets because a list can join on a lot of things, but data sets inside studies are really designed specially to join on visit and participant and all those other great things. And we wanted to figure out how to do that, so we could either go back to LabKey or we could try it ourselves. So rather than go back to LabKey, because we had basically run out of money almost, you know, we decided what we really wanted, that we really did have to have data sets, because that allows admins and editors, they can create new views that are relevant to the hypothesis and the files in question. We'd already built a lot of stuff in-house, so it only took about a week's worth of coding to change Susan's work so it uses data sets instead of lists. This is an XKCD about knowing what your requirements are. In this case, we should have known what our requirements were ahead of time. The final product looks a lot like a grid. It looks like a lot like a data set, but basically what happens here, you have some help up top that tries to explain the elaborate process of getting signed up for Globus and downloading the client. But once you have everything ready to go, you're running the client, you've created your endpoints and everything over at Globus, you have a data set. This is just a regular data set. It just happens to be keyed by file name along with participant and visit, and you can join on any other data set. What we're showing here is that the end user can do their filtering, they can create participant groups, whatever they need to do, and once they've narrowed it down and picked a couple files, this transfer button over here will light up, thanks to my UI guy, Peter Riggs, who knows how to light up buttons. And then there's a pretty easy process from starting out in TrialShare. You pick your endpoint. We've recoded it, so it's probably going to default this for you. You come back here, you click transfer, and it just happens. In other words, LabKey initiates the transfer for you. So we think that we've taken something that is already extremely complicated, and we've made it as simple as possible, but I will say that what we're trying to do, it's not easy, you know. These three-way negotiations, trying to move files from one point to another in using this system. I don't know that we would have picked all this if we had it to do again, but it works, and it works well. The only problem is going to be getting those users trained up. You know, that first time it's a bear. You know, because you've got to go to our system, you've got to go to their system and everything. So there's not much we can do about that. Since we're getting ready to go to lunch, I'm not going to go through all these, but we've written a lot of programs internally for TrialShare. The one I'll mention is that we have this small Java program that allows a LabKey user, it's not just TrialShare, but if you can type in LabKey SQL, it will write it to a database of your choice. So in other words, if you don't want to try to go to the back end or de-JSONify stuff, this will do it for you. That's something we use. We have Danger Mouse. This is a small program that uses some of our custom code that we export entire studies to pipelines and wipe out the pipelines and reload them based on what's in the study, which is a tool that we need. And we have a lot of other tools that are mostly internal, but if anybody ever has questions about how do I get this information back out of LabKey, how do I write a program that does this small tool thingy I need to load my data, we have a lot of experience with that. So feel free to come to us, and LabKey, of course. And that's all I have.